Thank you very much for your presentation. I am delighted to be able to participate in this important event that celebrates 25 years of an organization that helps the IT world so much. I have one goal with this talk, and it's that we can get to know how to improve our testing process, knowing how to choose which problems are the ones we want to correct in order to get the most out of them. My name is Jesús Alonso. I am currently responsible for service management at Leda. In my career, I have always been close to team management and above all the quality management. Yes, I am close to the quality world, and for several years I've been professionalizing testing teams and managing quality from government's point of view. Now let's talk about Leda. Leda is a company where we work with international clients and help them improve their development processes. We improve the quality of the delivery product and the efficiency of the teams. The road I have planned for this talk is as follows. We will start by looking at some characteristics a project that are the basis on which we will talk about how to make an assessment of a testing process. We will look at the most important points, and we will see that we have to take into account so that the diagnosis or assessment we make is profitable. Then we will see how to do a quality benchmarking, and finally, we will be able to see which is the result that will allow us to improve our testing process. Throughout the presentation, we will see real examples. A project usually encompasses a lot of features. That's where we see the goals, and in a project we have and goals. There will be also some benefits, and it is common that in the project we rely on processes to make the production chain of our software product is productive. In other ways, it's essential to use specific tools that help us manage the projects and all its features. In this forum, we will all know about testing process, what they are, and how to monitor them. I'm not going to tell you anything new about what they are or how to implement them. What I'm going to tell you is how to get it right in order to improve them. It's not all a joy and congratulations. We all know that even if a theoretical infallible quality process has been devised, always, there is always something to improve so that the result of the team's work is as expected. So what can we do to improve the testing process? Well, we can start by doing two things. There are two activities or tasks that ensure that the change we implement in the process will result in any improvement. The first is the assessment of the testing process, and the second is benchmarking. Both complement each other, and let's see how they do it. We use assessment to collect two types of information. The first is the information that is not quantified, and the second is the indicators which are quantified. With all the non-quantifiable information that we collect, we will be able to determine what is not working well. From the assessment, we can also extract indicators, as I said. After all, indicators, also information, but expressed as values. But to know how to know whether the value of an indicator is good or bad, it becomes a little more difficult, and it could be that we could begin to interpret them in the subjective ways. To put an end to subjectivity, the best thing to do is to compare with the market. With that, we will know how good or bad we are compared to outsiders. We use benchmarking as a tool that allows us to have a frame and contextualize a vision of the state of our product or projects compared with others. In this way, with these two tools, assessment and benchmarking, we can have the possibility to obtain the results that allow us to make a series of recommendations that show us where to put the focus and energy to improve the testing process. Let's start with the assessment. Let's see what do we have to do to make the assessment. Well, what we are going not to do is just sit there. As we said before, what we do is not gather information. Is to gather information, sorry, to find out about everything. We are going to ask and ask and ask and ask questions until you have a complete map. A map of the organization and testing process. So we will look at all of these phases and parts that make up the testing process. This slide could represent the most important parts to look in order to make an assessment. I will take this opportunity to make an aside. During this talk, I will not talk for agile or traditional methodologies. I'm going to speak in general way to try to cover the whole spectrum. So let's move on. Well, as I was saying, to make an assessment, we could start by gathering information about the requirements. We could also collect information from IT and application life management. We could also ask ourselves about the tools to support the process, the processes and the work of people. And finally, in assessment, we will also look for all the information related to the most important part, the testing. Okay, usually the testing process starts with the requirements or user stories. Well, from them, we will check if the functional requirements or no functional requirements or integration requirements, for example, are defined. We will check if the requirements are clear. For example, if they are fully explained or understandable by all the teams that must consult them. If they are consistent or not ambiguous, we will also look to see if the requirements are traceable and if they are registered in a tool. We are going to see the example. As I said before, of the assessment we made for one of our clients. As I mentioned it at the beginning, we will see real examples of one of the many assessments we have carried out. In this particular case, when we extracted the evidences, we preferred to divide them into a strength and weakness to make them clearer. Let's look at the strength part. It was found that there were meetings where the requirements were formally approved. It's nice to see a strength of this type. We could also see that tests could start to be written thanks to the functional documents that were available before the development itself. A weakness we identified was that business did not prioritize as well as expected. We also realized that there was not mechanism in place to notify the testing team of change to functional documents. For this part, IT or application life management, we will look for information such as whether there are environments specifically for testing, and if these environments exist or their relationships to the rest of environments will. Of course, we will ask about the available, if the environment is available, for the environments and the any relevant technical feature that may be related to the testing process. On the other hand, it's important to know if the test environments are exclusive to the quality teams or they are accessible to other users. We should ask ourselves if the product versions to be tested are versioned through configuration management, for example. There is another example here on strength and weakness regarding IT and ALM. Highlight among the strength that they had documented deployment instruction, and there were defined procedures for reading data from the environments. Among the weakness, we show something that happens frequently, and that is that they do not usually report the functionalities that are included in the development, or, for example, which defects are resolved in the package. We will also to check, for example, that there was not user acceptance testing environment, or for example, if it was done in the same that quality assurance test environments. As it is common, nothing was done about the code quality, and there was no planning of development. In the world of testing, tools play a fundamental role. Well, in order to make a good assessment, we need to know which tools are used to record tests and defects, and even the requirements. In other words, any tool that could be used by testing teams. We will ask ourselves if the tools allow us to relate the information, if the life cycle defined in the documentation are supported by the tools and are consistent. In our project, we were able to perceive among the strength that there was a mantis for recording defects, and that they use it to test link for test cases. In addition, they were able to relate the test cases with their defects, with which always is always a good thing. Among the weakness, we could see that the defect life cycle was quite complex for this intended purpose. The testing of user acceptance tests, for example, were not being recorded because they were being done by business teams that are not trained in the world of testing. Let's move on the test. Of course, to make a good assessment, we will look at this part, which is the most important. In this section, we will check if there is a testing strategy, and if the organization in general and the teams that interact with the test are aware of it. We will check whether the test plans include an estimate of the test cases themselves. We will look to see if they have written down the risks and associated with them the actions to be taken to mitigate or accelerate them. We will also look if the defects are registered and treated in a specific tool or who has access to it. We will look at reports. We will pay attention to what they report, the indicators used and KPIs, how they report them. For example, if they are clear and well presented. As well, in the other cases, here is an example of a strength and weakness. Let's start with the strength. We saw that they had a defined and documented strategy, that the coverage of the test case was correct, and that traceability with requirements and bugs was covered. On regression, we had a high degree of maturity and also smoke testings. Tracking and control was reported properly. Regarding weakness, user acceptance test were a weakness as they were performed by business people who were not involved in the specific testing processes, for example. As a major weakness found, it's that reviewing the reports, we could see some important shortcomings in terms of quality process indicators. Let's move on benchmarking. Well, let's briefly review before we continue. From the assessment, we have obtained on the one hand, very valuable information that we have been able to separate between strength and weakness. On the other hand, we have also been able to find out the values of some indicators. Remember that the values of the indicators might not tell us anything a priori. They are not conclusive, and that is why we are in this section, in benchmarking. Benchmarking uses, as I said at the beginning, to contextualize the values of the indicators extracted from the assessment. In other words, we put the values in reference to those of the market to see how far they deviate from the market average. In this case, we had the opportunity to take advantage on the fact that for the development that were being made, there were software product measurements in the factor standard of the market. What did this allow us to do? Well, it allowed us to standardize many quality indicators in order to obtain more results in the comparison with the market values. So in order to do benchmarking, we need 3 points. As an entry point, we have the assessment indicators that by their nature, we cannot normalize. Assessment indicators that we can normalize, and the market values of the indicators. In our case, thanks to the extensive database we have in my company, I think we have 60,000, over 16,000 projects. We have fairly consistent data. And what we expect from the benchmarking output is that we can compare them with the market. And what does looking at the market offer us? Well, it gives us the opportunity to compare the project's own indicators with those of similar situation in other projects outside or our company. It's always very valuable to be able to compare in this way in order to be able to set targets and discover weakness in our testing process. Here we will look at this output in detail comparing the indicators of our projects with those of the market. Let's look at some concrete example. We're not going to go into all of them. I'm only going to show some indicators that I consider to be the most representative. For example, we will see the error rate indicator, which values exceeds the expected value. For example, the market reference for this type of project and industry, the value exceeded 33%, and we mark it in red to identify those that we should review and see why they behave differently than expected. In this case, being above a market for this indicator means it's not good. Having more defects per test case indicates a high error rate. In the indicator of market test effectiveness, we have seen that it has a negative value. It is below the market. But the nature of this indicator tells us that being below is not recommended. In other words, there should be more defects detected in quality assurance phase. In this example, with a negative value as well, the indicator tells us that it's good to be below the market. No defects are reopened, and that means that the team solving the bug is good. For another example, I'll leave a few seconds for you to look at them. I'm not going to comment on them, as I'm sure you're already analyzing them. You can see the density of the test carried out or defect density or test coverage. We come to the end of the presentation. All that remains is the result of all this work we have done with benchmarking and assessment testing. We recall that our objective was to obtain the results that will allow us to make a series of recommendations that will indicate where to put the focus and energies to improve the testing process. Well, here we are going to see a matrix of recommendation as an example of a result. In the matrix, we will identify the origin, either if it comes from the assessment or if it is benchmarking. Then we will see the indicators or information. Remember that the information or indicator could be obtained from the assessment. Okay, so with this regards to this information or indicator, we will highlight the anomaly detected. And finally, we'll make a recommendation based on our knowledge of the sector. We're going to give some representative example of the case. Remember that we had identified some KPIs were missing in the reports. This was discovered by doing the assessment. The recommendation is obvious. Review and propose indicator appropriate to the project and propose a scorecard. Here is a second example. Through benchmarking, we have just seen in the previous slide an indicator that was below the market. The indicator quality of test performed, and the value was 23 below the market. What this indicator means? It measures the number of valid defects. Well, as a recommendation, we could indicate that more care should be taken when reporting defects, as they could be duplicated. We could also recommend that the testing team should review the functional change before finalizing the test case design phase. Now, for another example, This is time again to see what is originates from the assessment. In particular, this information was extracted from in the tool review phases. The defect life cycle was very complex and didn't give us any more information that if it was a simpler cycle. Hence, we could recommend a resync and resync. Well, this is the end of the matrix review. As you can see, it's aligned, it's linked together. And all the information that we have been able to extract previously must be taken in account. I hope that with these tools I have shown during this presentation, that is the matrix of recommendation in this slide, the benchmarking that helped us to establish context of the values of the indicators, and with the assessment, we will be able to improve a testing process anytime. So I thank you for attendance, and now it's time to question. If I can answer you now to any detail, please contact me, and I will take about another time. Here I leave the email. Take a note or it to contact me for any matter.